The BloodStream Podcast, episode 41, is brought to you by our presenting sponsor, Takeda. Learn more about Takeda's commitment to the bleeding disorders community and the resources they have to offer at bleedingdisorders.com.
Hello, and welcome to the BloodStream Podcast, episode 41, October 21st, 2019. I'm Patrick James Lynch.
And I'm Natalie Lynch.
On this episode, NHF's 71st Bleeding Disorders Conference is in the books. You'll hear from a variety of conference attendees who Natalie spoke with during a very special segment. Amy and Debbie will recap one of the mental health sessions offered during the conference in our A Moment for Mental Health segment. And Natalie and I will share a couple of personal highlights from BDC 2019 in today's comment segment. Plus, Disorder, the Rare Disease Film Festival, takes place next month in San Francisco. Bombardier Blood helps kick things off on opening night, November 9th, and festival co-founder Daniel DeFabio joins me to discuss Disorder during today's interview segment. And finally, some safety news, some streaming recs, and more coming up on this episode. Welcome to BloodStream. So, Natalie, we have got a lot of BDC stuff to get to. I think you spoke to between 3,000 and 4,000 people during the conference?
More like 5 people, Patrick. But 5 community members with very different stories, different reasons for being there, and I think listeners are really going to enjoy hearing from them.
You'll also hear Natalie and I give our personal takeaways and lasting thoughts from BDC 2019 a bit later in the show. We've also got that interview with Daniel DeFabio to get to, but I want to kick things off first with 3 important safety updates. Full disclosure, we are recording this on October 8th, so things may have changed by the time you hear this. The first is in regards to recent news about an issue related to particle matters in vials of Hemophilia. There have been numerous statements from Roche and NHF HFA, including this one from Roche dated October 7th, which reads in part, quote, "During a routine examination of drug product batches as part of our quality assurance systems and processes, hardly visible translucent particles were identified in Hemophilia outside our particle specification. These particles are inherent to the drug product, and based on toxicology and safety assessments and review of available data, the benefit-risk profile of Hemophilia remains unchanged as a result." Also on October 7th, this from NHF, MASAC Medical Communication on Particle Matter, or particulate matter. Particulate, a word I was not familiar with before this came up. Apparently particle is not good enough in science. We have particulate matter in emicizumab and other biologic agents, which states in part, quote, "After MASAC was informed of this issue on October 5th, representatives from Roche Genentech were available to answer questions. The following points were presented to MASAC. The appearance of particle matter includes vials of emicizumab that were used both during the clinical trial program and commercially available product. The particulate matter exceeded the manufacturer's pre-established threshold. In a look back at all previous lots of emicizumab, this problem has been present since the initial clinical trials but was only recently identified. This is a manufacturing issue that is well described in scientific literature and subject to oversight by regulatory health authorities who have provided their assessment and deemed that there is no change to the risk-benefit evaluation for the use of emicizumab. The finding of particulate matter in a number of vials of emicizumab has been reviewed by regulatory health authorities in the United States, Switzerland, Canada, Japan, and the European Union, who have all determined that there is no change to the risk-benefit evaluation of emicizumab as is currently manufactured and available for patient use. No reports from end users of product have been received by Roche Genentech up to this point." It goes on along those lines until the statement reads, "Based on the information that MASAC has available at this time, including information on the assessments of regulatory health authorities, MASAC does not recommend a change in prescribing practice nor interruption in the use of emicizumab for patients already using the product." The second safety news item has to do with the manufacturing failure at Bayer. The following is from a September 23rd letter co-signed by NHF and HFA CEOs addressed to Bayer's Vice President and General Manager of Hematology. Quote, "On August 9th, Bayer sent a letter to NHF and HFA explaining the errors and failures that allowed the product mix-up and mislabeling to occur. Based on information conveyed in the Bayer letter, it is clear that Bayer violated a number of FDA current good manufacturing practice regulations, resulting in Bayer's distribution of a drug that was alterated. Again, altered, adulterated, I don't know why we need fancier words in science. The list of apparent violations includes failing to meet quality control standards. Bayer's August 9th letter describes a chain of human errors that resulted in the product mix-up and mislabeling. 4 separate individuals' processes had to fail in order for the product mix-up and mislabeling to occur. It then took Bayer months to discover these failures. This cascade of human errors, compounded by the delay in discovering Bayer's quality control failures, is deeply concerning and strongly suggests that Bayer failed to meet the personal training and qualification requirements of a long-coded thing that's referenced in the writing if you want to read it, maintaining a deficient facility setup. That was another one of the violations referenced. Requiring design and construction of facilities and operations, including labeling operations, in such a manner as to preclude mislabeling and product mix-ups. Bayer reports that it kept multiple different products, expired and non-expired, in a single cold storage area. Third, violating equipment identification requirements. On October 7th, NHF and HFA released a statement noting their ongoing conversations with the FDA on this matter and noting them as productive. And a few days prior to that, on October 1st, NHF and HFA also co-signed a letter to the community on the topic of safety a few days ahead of the BDC. It addresses these and some other issues that have recently surfaced, and I'll finish up the updates with this letter. Quote, "Community members, we understand the past few months have brought a lot of anxiety and uncertainty to our community as we have dealt with a variety of critical issues that have called into question the safety of products we use, the type of partners we rely on for our health, and the type of community that we want to be. Whether it was the Bayer Cogenate recall, issues with respect to needle size as reported by Genentech, or ongoing concern about healthcare in general, the level of concern in our community is high, and rightfully so. We are advocates for the health and well-being of each and every member of the bleeding disorders community, and when we feel any of our voices are not heard, it is and should be a cause for concern. Importantly, we've begun to work through how we will actively manage issues like these in the future and how we can meet your needs in the most effective way. Together, NHF and HFA have engaged outside experts to help us, and they will be providing guidance on effective communication advocacy and planning for the future. Working with our outside experts, we've already taken several steps to help us move forward, including a joint planning committee that's been created to organize a safety summit in January of 2020, bringing together patient organizations and patients, along with medical providers, government, and industry, to review current standards and processes in place to address product safety and discuss how these measures may be improved or expanded. Assessing our communications processes so that we are meeting the needs of community members in terms of notification, information, advocacy, and input, moving rapidly on the flow of information from our groups to industry and faster information from industry back to the community. We will continue to focus on the need for expedited and more robust communications among stakeholders, assessing what it means to be both a change agent and an advocate. The letter concludes with some empowering community messages and is signed by both Val Bias and Sharon Myers. So I know that was a lot, but it's important stuff. And if you're interested in reading up on any of this yourself or to check for updates to these stories, again, we're recording this on October 8th. Please check out the links in the program notes or visit the news pages on either HFA or NHF's websites. All right, Nat and I will take a short break and then...
Phew. Thanks, Patrick. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed and overworked at the moment.
Yeah, I know that was a lot for you. I'm sorry to put you through so much. And we'll be right back with our like segment and attendee accounts of BDC 2019.
Before we start the like segment, we want to thank this month's like segment sponsor, Genentech. Now, you probably know the impact of bleeding disorders goes beyond whether your blood will clot, but there are both social and psychological burdens that affect people living with hemophilia. Recently, Genentech partnered with the University of Pennsylvania's Positive Psychology Center to develop 2 unique workshops. These 90-minute sessions are practical, science-based programs specifically designed to help members of the hemophilia community develop their cognitive and emotional skills to thrive in spite of challenges associated with bleeding disorders. Your Genentech Hemophilia Community Clinical Educator can help you attend one of these interactive workshops. Clinical educators are a team of individuals with nursing degrees who are dedicated to being an educational and informational resource. You can connect with your local clinical educator by calling 1-866 1-866-436-5427. Again, that's 1-866-436-5427.
Well, thank you very much, Natalie. Thank you, Genentech. And now on to this month's Like segment, where we have a special series of short interviews that Natalie conducted during the Bleeding Disorders Conference earlier this month. Just before we dive in, Natalie, give us a sense, what exactly are we about to hear?
Well, I talked to a bunch of people. You know, your 3,000 to 4,000 comment earlier was not far off, but I recorded conversations with 5 people.
I see.
And I tried to record conversations with people having what would be presumably different experiences. Someone going in the women's track, someone going in the men's track, teen track, spouses track, rare disorders track, a look into mental health. So I kind of just wanted to see what the experience was like for people who kind of looked at the program and maybe highlighted different things from other people I interviewed.
And was there anything in particular that jumped out to you or surprised you across all these conversations?
I wouldn't say that I was like very surprised by anything, but what did jump out that I thought was interesting was in a couple of the conversations, this desire of sort of a mentorship with people of the older generation and people of the younger generation, that they kind of feel like they have had very different experiences with the same disorder, and the challenges have been different, and what it looks like even in their body.
Right.
And that was discussed in my conversation about the spouses track, about like being partnered up with someone who might have other issues going on, such as HIV or Hep C, versus a young couple now who maybe the affected person has had prophylaxis their whole life and haven't been co-infected. So it was just, that was kind of interesting and jumped out to me.
All right, so let's hear them. A collection of conversations, a variety of conversations from BDC 2019.
So I'm here with Mike Tuberdick, and Mike and I have crossed paths a lot at this conference. Mike, you are here as a man with a bleeding disorder.
Right.
And can you tell me about how your experience at the conference has been, what sessions you've attended, what you found interesting?
Well, we've been fortunate enough to come to the conferences for almost 30, maybe 30 plus years. And as a person with severe hemophilia and seeing a lot of things in life, coming to these conventions and sitting in on the men's groups has really been so wonderful, because you get to share a lot of experiences. I'm seeing, people who are in the ages that I am, in the 60 plus range, and then getting a chance to experience things with the younger members in their 20s to 30s and 40s, and they get to kind of share their experience along with us as the older guys.
Do you feel like the sessions account for the older generation?
Through the years, with Val Bias being head of CEO of NHF, we've seen a big change through the years to draw more attention to the adults, people who are aging, which means that we're still here when a lot of times people thought we weren't going to be around that many years. So people are living longer, and we have more specific needs, and the programs actually help us a lot.
Was there a session, this conference, that really stood out to you, that maybe changed the way you thought about something, or brought up questions for you, or just that you just found interesting?
The last program we just sat in on was dealing with depression. And that's something a lot of times people haven't really thought about in terms of hemophilia. How do you deal with your history of your health, what's going on maybe on a daily basis, and also in the short term and long term, how have people been dealing with that? And this is the first time we've really had an in-depth look at maybe how to deal with depression, and had a lot of feedback from a lot of people who were there that I thought really made an impact to all of us. Very good topic. And Dana, who is the social worker from San Francisco, really was, I thought, a very strong influence on how this program went.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I sat in on that session too. The connection between PTSD and hemophilia, and that just even living with a chronic condition or chronic disorder, that there is a sense of, not a sense, but actual trauma, and that life experience is then informed by that. Had you heard that before, or was that a new thing to hear?
I think it was really how it was brought up was very new to me. I think many people may have dealt with that kind of a feeling or those kind of situations because there have been a lot of catastrophic things that have gone in the hemophilia population. Everything from obviously the HIV days to dealing with liver cancer to dealing with various things that the general population may not have really seen, but the hemophilia population has been hit quite strongly with a lot of those situations. So PTSD, it would seem like that's probably an area that we have never looked at.
And for a man with hemophilia, and specifically a man of your generation, do you feel like, speaking to the men at home who didn't have the ability to or couldn't attend this year, what would you say you benefited most from this particular conference and just the conferences in general?
It was great to see another program with couples, and that kind of get a chance to sit and talk about maybe relationships. You got to kind of share your thoughts in terms of maybe how people live with their day-to-day routines, some of the really tough times and how couples deal with it, along with new members who may be just engaged, maybe guys with girlfriends, girls with boyfriends, and how they see maybe other couples living with this and maybe how they've dealt with it, maybe with some help from these kind of programs. I've learned an awful lot through the years.
Yeah, it's been I also attended some of those sessions too, and I found them very, very helpful. But, well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to BloodStream, and thank you.
Very nice, and I appreciate your help too. Thank you.
All right, I am here in the exhibit hall with Dominic Fernandez, a recipient of a Teen Impact Award. Dominic, can you talk about what the award show was like, what your experience receiving it was, which award you received, and what it meant to you?
Yeah, so I received the Advocacy Impact Award, and it meant a lot to me personally because I remember just growing up, and I always looked and strived to be on the advocacy on some level where I would be recognized by maybe a senator or something. So I think just throughout my life, even starting in elementary school, I started advocacy and just trying to get that relationship and set. And so when I go back, it's like, oh, they already know my story, so what can I do for you? And about the award ceremony, it was awesome. I felt like a celebrity the whole time. Just like the whole surrounding areas and seeing the past, it felt like it was a serious milestone for everybody, like it was to me. And so I think it was just really cool, and how it was like an award ceremony, and I don't know, it's just the feeling is just, you can't really describe it. It's just, you almost feel like famous being there, and everyone's like, oh, you won, and then after the show people want to get photos with you, and so it's like, whoa. And so I think it's just a really cool experience overall, and something that I think me and on behalf of everybody else will never forget.
What would you say to teens who don't know where to get started in terms of advocacy? Like, what would be a good starting point? And just someone who's looking forward to helping in the community but just doesn't know where to begin. What would you tell them?
Well, I would start personally. I think I would start at the bigger events where it's more of like a group effort. So like at walks, or maybe like if your chapter has a advocacy day, I think that's a great place to start, just because you have so many people that's done it before and they support you. And that's how personally I've learned, is through the big events, and they kind of just take you under the wing and can mentor you through it. And I don't know, just the support from all the big events will just teach you slowly and give you the more comfort advocating and getting fundraisings, and then soon enough, without you even realizing it, you'll be running a walk team or having your own meeting with a senator or representative, and you'll be where you wanted to be, and you won't even notice the time.
So starting as a group, and then once you get comfortable taking initiative as a leader and moving forward. That's great. And you participated in the inaugural Hemophilia the musical back last fall. That's when I first met you.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that experience and how from that experience to this meeting, have you felt like your community with your peers in the bleeding disorders community has grown or changed, and how just being a part of that event impacted you?
Well, the event is just straight up unforgettable. Like, I think if I got amnesia, I'd still remember that event. It was just so impactful on me and the community, and I think just being able to wear the jacket around with pride to different events is just way worth it all. With every hard work that went into the small application, and it really showed a new community of people that was across the state and had the same interests as me, same problems about sports, and I think that's just something that you can't replace. And just having it from all over the nations, you go to a small event that you think, oh, I'm not gonna see anyone you know, and you run in, and then it's just you're comfortable. And just seeing everybody from the events on different local chapters or HFA and NHF events, it's just impactful to something. I can't even describe it. It's just, the community just grew for me so much. It grew, and I met so many people, and I don't even know how to describe it. Just, I feel like my circle was the size of a penny, and just by that, it grew the size of a $50.
And do you feel more comfortable attending events now that you feel like, oh, I'm going to see this person who I had this shared experience with, and, where maybe like before that, it can be intimidating to come to an event like this?
Yeah, so I found NHF events, big national events, they're very intimidating to me, and just having that connection to a close group and being able to say, oh, well, I know him. He'll be at the teen track. It just kind of gives you more comfort saying, oh, okay, I got this. And it kind of like, when you get there, it's almost like you already break the ice because you know two people. And then the other teens just kind of somehow end up together. And it's just something that I'm just so grateful because, and look, there's even people waving from the musical too.
That's awesome. And if next year you could change one thing about the teen track, would there be something you'd like to see from NHF? An event or a skill that you'd like to learn or a way to foster community?
Well, I do have a couple bias. I went to a NHF event back in 4th grade. It was probably it was in the Florida NHF convention, and they took all the kids to SeaWorld. So I think nice, fun field trips would be a good way, I think.
Which is great. Who doesn't like a field trip?
Yeah.
Dominic, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to BloodStream. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm here at NHF with Danelle Brown. And Danelle, you are a woman with a bleeding disorders in 2019. Can you tell us who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about your bleeding disorder?
Yes. Like you said, my name's Danelle, and I'm from, I live in Middletown, Pennsylvania now, which is right outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. But I'm a first-generation immigrant from Ghana, West Africa. And it's my first conference. I feel so grateful to be here. I was really eager to come and learn. It's been very challenging and overwhelming, however. I have family history of bleeding disorder. We're all factor VIII deficient. The women, my brother and a couple of uncles have severe factor VIII. So, but in my culture, we really don't talk about much. Forget about like the physical health, because you're supposed to be a big girl and go through life and not complain about anything. But it's and our mental health challenges aren't talked about. In fact, on my way here, I was so excited that I was coming here, and my mom passed a little while ago. And so I called my aunt and I was like, I'm coming here with my daughter. She's 12. And, we're going to just learn so much about the disease because we just didn't talk about it. I don't even believe half the women in my family even will want to get tested, because I don't want to, please don't be grossed out about this or anything, but I remember when I first got my menstrual, my grandmother sat me down and she literally made a bed of pads. It was like the 3 on one side, 3 on another side, a couple in the middle. And she was like, this is what we do. We are bleeders and this is our fate. So when I was hooked up with my hemophilia clinic and my treatment center and started to learn a lot more, I felt so, a sense of urgency to infuse, no pun intended, my daughter with as much information as possible. And so to get a response from my aunt like, oh, why would you take Lydia out of school to bring her to this thing? I was like, oh, we're still in 1950 or people just don't want to talk about this stuff. So initially I was so excited to come here and so excited to learn and have my daughter experience this. But it's been challenging as well, because the sessions that you go to, I mean, I have a master's degree in justice, law, and society, and the jargon was like, I just had to be laser focused to just really try to get my mind around it. And so my daughter, my 12-year-old, sitting right next to me, and I'm like, oh man, am I confusing her more, or she doesn't even know what's going on? So I'm really, I feel like one of the things that the universe brought to me, wanting me to come here, is to experience this, because I really want to work with NHF to find a space for people who have mental health challenges to be able to navigate all this. It's just, I needed to find a place to breathe, and I don't know what else to say more.
No, that's great. And it's awesome to, hear your story and know you come from a family where there's a lot of kind of stuffing the health issues, both physical and mental. And I do appreciate your candidness with the story of your first menstrual cycle. And I'm in women's health. I'm a doula, so that is not at all, doesn't creep me out or make me feel weird at all. I totally embrace candid conversation around periods and reproduction and women with bleeding disorders having a voice. So, you came from a family that didn't really talk about this, and you've been embraced here at NHF, but then you talked about the overwhelming aspects of coming to the conference for the first time and seeing this huge booklet with so many opportunities and, seeking help to kind of navigate that. And I think that's great feedback for the next conference too, of, someone who is coming here for the first time, maybe kind of going through a registration and having someone touch point with them of, if you need any help navigating this, here's a person you can contact, or, that might be some interesting feedback to pass on to NHF. And you and I met at a mental health forum, and I know this year they're starting to put a little bit more focus on mental health here at NHF. So women with bleeding disorders and mental health, and men with mental health, specifically, hemophilia and what those issues that have been stuffed within the community, and your interest in getting involved in the mental health aspects. What was that session like for you to attend, and what would you like to see more of?
The session it was very intimate. It was enlightening. I felt like I was among my people. I just hope that we get to a place where when we share our mental health experiences or that we can have this conversation and it's just commonplace and people are filled with compassion and what can I do or how can I help? I think that the session was unbelievable. I just heard people here and there share my story within their story, and that was very empowering to me.
And it's great. It's great to be able to connect. You feel both as a woman with a bleeding disorder and someone who experiences mental health bouts that you here at NHF are seen and part of the community.
Yes, absolutely. That's what my wish is.
That's great. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to BloodStream, and it's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm glad that you've had a great experience, albeit overwhelming at times, but an overall wonderful experience here, and I'm so happy that you brought your daughter and that from a young age, she'll get to experience what you didn't have the opportunity to. So thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Hey, Patrick again. Forgive this interruption, but I wanted to bring you, well, a special treat, actually. One of Believe Limited's highlights during BDC 2019 was a powerful storytelling event that we produced in partnership with BioMarin and The Moth, the world-renowned storytelling organization out of New York City. The event featured 3 extraordinary stories and storytellers, and those 3 stories will kick off BloodStream Media's latest podcast series, BloodStream Journeys. BloodStream Journeys goes beyond the comfortable, challenging storytellers to share that which scares them, pulling out the moments, emotions, thoughts, and themes that define their stories. BloodStream Journeys is an elevated audio experience led by the voices of this community, taking you for a powerful ride. So, BloodStream Journeys coming soon, stand by, and in the meantime, we want to bring you one of those first 3 stories from episode 1 of BloodStream Journeys, and that story belongs to none other than Illinois' own Vanessa Flora, and that is coming to you right now.
My name is Vanessa Flora. I live in Indianapolis, Indiana. I grew up in California, but I'm now in Indianapolis. When I was in the 4th grade, I had my tonsils removed. My best friend just had hers out. You'll get ice cream, she said. You'll get to stay home and watch movies all day, she said. So I was actually looking forward to this procedure that would terrify most kids. The day came, and I remember waking up from surgery feeling groggy and sore and nauseous, and then the blood came. I was throwing up the blood clots from the back of my mouth into this little basin. I remember my mother fiercely arguing with the surgeon across the room about this condition that runs in our family. My little helmet-clad brother had hemophilia, and when he was a baby, I had to hold him on pillows, and now we are in and out of doctor's offices in the emergency room every time that he gets hurt. But my mother pressed on. She argued with the surgeon, although he continued to insist that girls cannot have hemophilia. It only runs in boys. But my mother continued to press on because my bleeding was not normal. And in fact, it looked very much like my little brother's bleeding. She needs her brother's medicine, my mother insisted. Finally, help came, and the nurse from my brother's hemophilia treatment center made a special trip to my little small town with some factor for me. And I was able to get it right before I was rushed back to the operating room for another cauterization. Well, the bleeding finally stopped, and I finally got my ice cream. I was promptly worked up at my brother's hemophilia treatment center and was found to only have 20% of normal factor levels. I failed that drug that you sniff up your nose, and I learned that I needed my brother's medicine to stop my bleeding. But the only way that I could get it is if I enrolled in the clinical trial for this brand new generation of drugs that was not made from human blood, because I was a girl, and insurance companies didn't approve of girls getting factor. Later in high school, I joined my brother up at hemophilia camp. There was a girls-only cabin. We were this ragtag group of sisters and daughters of hemophiliacs, but we all had this shared hush secret of heavy menstrual bleeding and excess bruising. We girls broke into this exclusive boys club despite not really being taken serious for us having a bleeding disorder too. We learned what it meant to be proud of your bleeder status and to be a normal kid at camp if you were a boy. We also grieved alongside our male counterparts as many of the counselors and campers got sick with the HIV virus and died. We girls might have not been accepted as real bleeders, but we had family members with hemophilia, and some of us may even go on to pass it on to our sons. Outside of camp, I went on to advocate for bleeders and those with HIV and AIDS in our bleeding disorder community. But deep down, I still wrestled with some uncomfortable questions, such as, could my brother or I get sick like those kids at camp because of blood transfusions or bad factor? Am I the bleeder? Rather than dealing with these thoughts, I just chose to pursue a deeper passion of ballet. I spent almost every day at the dance studio and performed in many of the big ballets like the Nutcracker. I loved waiting in the wings, just ready to burst out and leap as high as my legs would take me. Ballet was my expressive force and my solitude. I wanted to do this for the rest of my life. So when it was time to grow up, I decided to chase my dream off at college. I auditioned for several dance programs and ended up attending Butler University in Indianapolis, which was one of the top schools in the country. My new friends were from all over the world. Dancing in college was competitive and fierce. We would dance 6 days a week from 9 a.m. till 6 p.m., and then we would have to complete our academic classes before or after that time. Sundays were for rest and for sewing point shoes. I was so busy and so far away from home that my bleeding disorder community just simply started to slip away. And also at that same time, the voice of denial started to seep in. All ballet dancers' joints hurt now and then, right? If you dance too hard, your joints swell, right? Because in the ballet world, if you were seen as weak or injured, you were passed on for the next girl. I don't bleed like my brother. I don't have it. I just have heavy periods. Girls cannot have hemophilia. After college, I moved even further away from home to join a professional dance company. I pushed through the pain. I avoided doctors. It was really easy because that word hemophilia was in my medical chart and I was not able to get health insurance. I even suffered the career-ending injury of a bad fall that, in retrospect, could have been remediated with a little bit of factor and medical care. But I didn't have hemophilia. Girls cannot get it. Sadly, that fall made me stop dancing, and then I went on to become a physical therapist. And despite joining the medical community, I still did not embrace my bleeding disorder. During graduate school, I got married, and soon after, my husband and I were expecting. We were so excited and scared to become parents. But my gut told me that I now needed to face this hemophilia thing head on because I was carrying a boy. My mom called. She was trying to encourage me to get into contact with the local hemophilia treatment center because you might need a little bit of help. You might need some factor. What are you going to do if this little boy has hemophilia? What are you going to do? Well, I dragged my feet, and finally, I decided to pick up the phone. I was really nervous that I would not be accepted back into the community, but Nurse Janet was there to answer. Hello, this is Vanessa. I am a hemophilia carrier with low levels, and I'm carrying a boy. So I need to get my own factor, and my OB wants to know what we need to do to deliver this boy safely. I was a prodigal daughter asking the community to let me back in. Elias's birth was long, but not complicated. And when I took off the Band-Aid from his heel stick, he was still oozing hours later. We learned that he had hemophilia. Nurse Janet was the first one to visit us in our hospital room, and she was there to hold our son and to tell us that everything was going to be okay. A little over 3 years later, I was back in the delivery room carrying another boy, and I had a new sense of ownership, and I was very prepared. I had my cord blood kit, I had my factor, I had my doula, my husband, and Emmett came flying into this world under a full moon right after Halloween. And amidst all of the chaos, my doula grabbed my factor out of my delivery bag, handed it to me. I mixed it up in between contractions, then handed it over to the nurse. And the doctor told the nurse, she doesn't need that medicine. Girls can't have hemophilia. Only boys can get it. But now I had my voice. Doctor, if you don't give the verbal order right now to allow me to have my medicine, we are going to be in a bloody mess here that you may not be able to clean up. Girls can have hemophilia. We are more than just carriers. And in fact, my factor levels right now are about 25%. Normally, they're in the low teens. Normal factor levels start at 50%. It's a thing called lionization. And after you give the order for my medicine, you are going to deliver this little boy safely. You are going to get a good cord blood sample kit. You are going to stitch me up, and then you're going to go over and you're going to read the protocol from my hemophilia treatment center about this thing called hemophilia, and I will be gladly here to answer any questions for you. And if you do not give the order, then I will push it myself because my oldest son also has hemophilia and I know how to push factor in an IV. Emmett's heel stick, just like his brothers, did not stop oozing. He has hemophilia too. As I put that new Band-Aid on his little heel, I smiled knowing that this thing called hemophilia is not a curse, but in fact, it's a gift that I will carry with me for a long time to come. The arrival of my boys taught me that I no longer have to deny and be silent about this condition that I was born with. I am a member of this bleeding disorder community as a bleeder. I need factor too. And now we have a daughter who is a confirmed carrier, and I can teach her to find her own voice when situations arise. In the end, what I have discovered is that hemophilia is something that can make you stronger and help you find your voice to love and care for yourself and your community that just happens to be missing a clotting protein.
Quick reminder to catch Vanessa's story and so many others on the new BloodStream Journeys podcast, coming soon to a subscribable RSS feed near you. Okay, back to the like segment and Natalie's BDC interviews.
So I'm here in the exhibition hall with Sam Petty, and he is wearing such a cool shirt. In a room full of 8 and 9s, I'm an 11. Sam, can you talk a little bit about that and your experience here, not having hemophilia A or B, what it's like to be at NHF? And I know this year there's more of an emphasis on rare factor disorders. Do you feel seen? Have you attended any special tracks that have been interesting? And just your general experience as a person with factor 11.
Okay, so the oddest thing about being a person with factor 11 is, despite being more common than like 13 or 5 or 7, it really has no treatment. And so it's weird seeing that because, I mean, it's more common. You would think that there would be more treatments and that kind of stuff, and it would be up there. I mean, it's right it's right under factor 8 and 9 with the most common. So it's that. And then like my shirt, it's kind of like, yeah, I'm this unicorn here. Like I've seen several 13s and all that. And I mean, it's fun being here because I kind of have to advocate for myself on what I am and what I do. And I get all these questions like, all right, I never heard of a treatment for this. So what exactly do you do for your bleeds? And it's like, all right, stim and Amicar. Yeah, create the clot and keep the clot. Yeah, so it's just interesting kind of having to advocate for myself, not only in my community, but in the bleeding disorder community as well.
And have you attended any sessions here this weekend that you've learned something new, or you've been able to share something about your experience with other people and taught them something new?
Yeah, so yesterday I got the privilege of attending a rare bleeding disorder panel, I guess. And they left it open to comments at the end, and I got to share a little of my story and talk about how I advocate for myself and all that. So, yeah. I'm also going to be attending most of the rare tract and see if there's anything that, like any info on Factor 11. So, yeah.
Is there anything that you would love to see next year for people with rare bleeding disorders that isn't here this year, or that you think would be helpful?
Obviously, I would like to see more people here with Factor 11. I mean, I get it. Sometimes you just can't get out here. But then there's also the educational seminars. I mean, if you are going to have a rare tract, you should try to have at least one seminar or panel or whatever for each one. And yeah, just try to get more content out there.
And do you think, as far as representation, you said that there's no specific treatment for 11. Have you talked to anybody in industry about what that means to you in terms of, research and development, and what treatment would mean for you and your life?
Yeah, so I have spoken to CEOs. I spoke to a CEO of Baxter a while back and talked to him about it, and he was like, oh, we're doing gene research, and obviously that's come out and it's definitely become a bigger thing. But like, no one's really there yet. And so that's kind of been my dream. I want to become a hematologist. I want to go to Israel and study the population there, because Factor 11 runs in 8% of the Ashkenazi Jewish population. And so where's the highest concentration? Israel. And so it's probably close to about 4% of the population there. Still not a high percentage, but more than you'll find in most other places.
That's amazing. And you were a recipient of a Teen Impact Award last night. Can you talk a little bit about the ceremony and what that experience was like, and what your award recognized you for?
Yeah, so I was recognized for the Leadership Award. I was nominated in both Michigan and Indiana, my home state. Go Indiana. Yeah, so I was recognized for being a leader, an advocate, and just someone who is open and makes people feel welcome. And honestly, just being open about who you are allows other people to feel more open. And once you get a conversation going, I mean, everyone's going to feel welcome. So that's kind of why I was there.
That's great. Well, thanks for taking the time to talk to BloodStream. And yeah, I loved your shirt. It made me laugh. That's awesome. Did you get it made custom?
Yeah, so I actually went to Walmart, just bought a basic shirt for $4, and then took it to a friend who was so generous and made the shirt for me, put all the lettering on. And this is actually the second one that she made for me. So
super cool. Well, it's nice to meet a Factor 11, and thanks for chatting with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here.
So I'm here at the National Bleeding Disorders Conference with Heather Britton. Heather, you got chosen to be part of the planning committee for the spouses track. Can you talk a little bit about your involvement with that, how you got involved, why you got involved?
Of course. It was an interesting journey, actually. After going to many local events for years and years and years, being a spouse, I've been married for 19 years to someone with moderate hemophilia A. And going to local events, I would get approached by other women asking how old my son was, which got very frustrating. You felt very isolated. You didn't really feel like you connected with anyone at local events. And when we moved to West Virginia, we started a chapter there, and we started to become involved at the national level. And about 5 years ago, this track finally had a place in the within all the tracks. And it started with a rap session. There were about 14 or 15 of us there, and we all sat in a circle, and literally the first feeling we had was, finally. And that's when the voices started to emerge, the challenges, the struggles, being married to someone with that condition. And there have been sessions over the past years just kind of dealing with that, with the focus being on how do we manage this life? How do we manage being that person, that advocate, stepping up and stepping out, being present for that person and being supportive? And over time, it's emerged. So bringing all those voices to the table and having them felt heard and connected has been really important for shaping how this track has evolved and how we want it to go forward.
That's great. You talked a little bit about sort of the division between spouses who are now just getting together where treatment is currently versus those who were, have been together 20 plus years. Do you want to talk about what that looks like and the differences that you see and the challenges that both groups do and do not face?
Challenges are still the same. You still have the underlying situations with the medical care, advocating for your care, advocating for insurance and coverage. Those challenges are still there. I think what I also tend to find, and I'm hearing this a lot with the sessions now, is the unaffected spouse's perspective. And this is across all generations. Now, the older ones may have figured out how to find that equilibrium, that balance, but the person with a bleeding disorder has their needs, but so does the unaffected person.
Yeah, that there, as I say, there's room for both, right? Both people's voices can be heard, and no, I think it's great. It's my fifth year here, and it's my second year kind of attending some of these sessions as a consumer, and I found it very helpful just to connect, to meet people like you, and to just know that there are other people who sometimes have compassion fatigue, sometimes feel like our needs aren't always seen, and that both partners' needs can have space in the relationship. Talking about the different generations and similarities, I think maybe it would be cool in a future session too to do some kind of pairing, right? Like a couple that's been together for a long time with a younger couple, and some kind of just pair up with a different couple who maybe can share some of the strategies, some of the tools they've come up with for possibly like a session next year. How have you seen this track evolve over the last 5 years, and what are your ideas moving forward?
Going forward, I really like the whole mentorship side of it, especially. And this year we are addressing the compassion fatigue, and that mentorship can definitely be helpful for younger couples trying to negotiate and navigate those waters. Maybe learn from the experiences of couples who have somehow made it work.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your passion and your dedication to what, personally for me, is a very important and integral part of this conference, and voices that weren't heard up until 5 years ago, and how this keeps evolving. So thank you so much for talking with BloodStream, and I hope to see you next year.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, Natalie.
Thank you, Natalie, for bringing us those conversations and those community perspectives. It's interesting to learn what brings people to the BDC. And thank you to Genentech, once again, for sponsoring and for partnering with UPenn on those two workshops. Talk to your clinical educator for more information. Again, 1-866-436-5427. I always like reading phone numbers on this. It feels so old school. For more information, again, that's 866-436-5427. Okay, it's time for a short break. Then Amy and Debbie will be in your ears with a moment for mental health. We'll be right back.
Welcome to A Moment for Mental Health, our monthly conversation that breaks down stigma and provides a safe space about things that matter. Our goal in this segment is to break mental, emotional, and behavioral health down into its various pieces, and in each episode, focus on just one or two of those pieces. I'm joined today, as always, by BloodStream contributor Debbie De La Riva, who is a licensed professional counselor with Mental Health Matters 2, based out of Houston, Texas. Thank you for joining us today and every day, Debbie.
Excellent. I look forward to this every month.
So in this episode in particular, we're doing some recaps of the Bleeding Disorder Conference that took place several weeks ago in Anaheim, California. And there was a session specifically around mental health. It was called Where Factor Doesn't Reach, Mental Health Issues in the Bleeding Disorders Community, that you and Patrick participated in. And I was just wondering if you could give us your thoughts and your takeaways from the session.
Definitely. First of all, I was really pleased with how the session went. I can never thank Patrick enough for being so willing to talk about his emotional struggles. I know for one that's not easy to do, but at the same time, the impact on people just knowing that they're not the only ones struggling with this, and it's okay to talk about it. The session wasn't well attended. There was just less than 20 people there. I think that had to do with the idea that they put closed sessions, and it was also only for men. The guys that were there, you can tell that there are two things really. They're very interested in seeing how other people have been impacted psychologically by their bleeding disorders. And the second thing is there is this sense of just wanting to help, wanting to reach out to others and be that person for them. A lot of sense of community in the room. They also brought up some really interesting issues.
What were some of those issues that they brought up?
You know, like I told you, the older gentleman had the sincere interest to help others. And at the same time, they also have their own issues about the community. In fact, they even expressed it like there seems to be a split between the older and the younger generation. The older generation feeling forgotten about, seeming like people aren't talking about what they went through. And then the younger guys were talking about how much guilt sometimes or shame they have about talking about depression or anxiety, when they have all the factor that they need at any time they need, and the factor is, a very effective product now. So lots of issues going back and forth.
Was that the only session at the conference specifically for patients? Were there other mental health sessions available?
Definitely. I counted 15 sessions on psychosocial matters. Anything from communications to transitioning. I'm very, very pleased. And in fact, the social workers had their own pre-con where they talked about anxiety, depression, and how to screen for it. And they even had a session on trauma-informed care. So I really love the direction that I'm seeing with our meetings to talk about the whole person. Very encouraging.
It is very encouraging. To pivot just a little bit, I saw on social media that October 10th was World Mental Health Day, and I'm sure that increased awareness just about mental health issues. I mean, it really was everywhere. But I thought maybe we could use this time to talk a little bit more about resources. I know a lot of people are slowly becoming aware and putting words to some mental health issues, but where to go is still very fuzzy. So I just wondered if you had some thoughts about that.
Yeah, I've had the privilege all year, this year, to go to different parts of the country, different chapter events and talk about mental health. And Amy, they're coming up to me and saying the same thing. Sure, I know I need the help, but I don't know where to go, or it's just cost prohibitive for me. So I'm glad that in this podcast, what we're doing is, what I want to do is let people know that there's publications out there, even workbooks, that they can purchase for less than $20 and work at their own pace on different issues. I mean, there's something for everybody. And just pick a topic, and I can even tell you the name of the book.
Really?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Let's think of some issue. How about anxiety? What is a book or a publication about anxiety?
It's probably one you've never heard about, but it's called Don't Feed the Monkey Brain. It's an amazing book. It just tells you how you can rein in those thoughts and feelings.
That's fantastic. What about anger?
There is a book for everybody. In fact, it's called Anger Management for Everyone. They even have an anger workbook for teens. I counted that they have 70 workbooks or books for adolescents with mental health issues, about 25 for kids, and over hundreds. And over 100 for adults.
What about something really specific? I mean, if you're looking, I mean, depression is such a large, broad issue, topic, has many different layers. What if you're looking specifically, like in our community, you know, signaling back to that session at the BDC, depression for men?
Definitely so. And so many times it usually takes on the form, it can take the form of anger. Usually that's how men manifest their depressive symptoms. And so there's a book for them too. And it can be something as specific as OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, even pain management, and utilizing mindful techniques to help gain some degree of control of your pain. It's out there. And the website is called New Harbinger Publications.
So Debbie, to wrap things up, what about resources in our own bleeding disorder community? Where can we send people in our community?
You know, one of the resources I'm so excited to talk about, it's relatively new. You can find it at Wingman Foundation, and basically it's called the Emotional Health Outreach Program. What all this amounts to, it's free short-term counseling to people who have hemophilia. So it's a great way to get that initial help. And sometimes that's all people need. Secondly, our community we have so many opportunities to connect to one another. Most people know about the Gut Monkey, the adventure-based experiential programs, Coalition for Hemophilia B, Blood Brothers, Women's Retreats, Camp, and chapter events. It's all there for us, just for the taking, and that to be connected with other people.
What a terrific point to bring up, that we have this well-established community and the resources to have so many events where people can meet and not be as isolated. They will understand the lingo and the language of hemophilia and von Willebrand's disease, and how that can impact positively in terms of mental health. That's a great reminder.
It's out there, and I have seen by speaking this year that mothers will come up to me and say, for example, that their young man that has severe hemophilia is just not feeling connected to the community anymore, and or they're struggling. And I happen to know someone across the country that's doing an amazing job with this. So it's through those connections that we begin to heal and get to be our best selves.
So great. Thank you as always, Debbie. I can't wait to have another conversation next month.
My pleasure. Thank you for everything you're doing for our community. It's amazing work.
Right back at you. Thank you so much.
Once again, we want to take a quick moment to thank our presenting sponsor, Takeda. Learn more about Takeda's commitment to the bleeding disorders community by visiting bleedingdisorders.com. Very easy to remember, bleedingdisorders.com. Moving into the episode 41 interview segment, my guest this month is one of the co-founders of Disorder, the rare disease film festival, a guy by the name of Daniel DeFabio. Daniel and I haven't spoken before, but since Bombardier Blood was accepted into the Rare Disease Film Festival, we have had a little bit of communication, but this will be the first time that we have actually spoken to each other on the phone. And he, like his co-founder, Bo Bigelow, has a personal story of life in the rare disease community, which we will speak about, I'm sure, and also a background in content making and producing and storytelling. So some nice synergies there with the kind of work that Believe Limited and BloodStream Media are doing. So I'm excited to meet Daniel. I hope you enjoy the interview. Okay, I'm joined now by the co-founder of Disorder, the Rare Disease Film Festival, Daniel DeFabio. Daniel, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So I, of course, want to talk about the festival, but one doesn't start a rare disease-specific film festival, of course, without a personal reason to do so. So by way of getting to know you, you and I haven't spoken before, and for our audience's benefit, can you share with us a little bit of your background and in particular how you came to be a member of the rare disease community?
Sure. I think probably nobody joins that community voluntarily. You get a diagnosis that you don't want, or in my case, my son got a diagnosis we didn't want, which was Menkes disease, which is also called kinky hair syndrome. And it's terrible, bad news. It's got a life expectancy of 3 to 10 years, and the developmental delays are as bad as you can imagine. And, it's a degenerative syndrome, but eventually you get out of your, your mindset of kind of depression and despair, and you look for answers. And when you Google something like this, there's so little, medical research done on the topic, and you can read it all in 40 pages, and none of it's good news. And I knew I couldn't change that, the facts of the matter, but I thought maybe by making a film about our experience, you could put that bad news into some context, and there'd be something else in the Google results that would show what a life is like, because nobody tells you that. They tell you your child's going to die. They don't tell you until then, what's your life going to be like? And so that's why I made the first film, the documentary about my son.
And you did that with the explicit intention of, as you said, adding something that wasn't about death and so horrific to kind of engage with when you're first trying to wrap your arms around this diagnosis. Did you have any vision for a greater collection of films or a film festival at that time?
No, at that time, I kind of thought I can just make the film and put it out there, and it toured the festival circuit, and it did okay on the festival circuit. But you really hope that it catches fire online and becomes this viral sensation. And it didn't exactly. And even when you look at the views, 13,000 views sounds awesome, but then you dig into those numbers and some people only watch the first 2 minutes. And then I think to myself, did I make my point in the first 2 minutes? It was after I felt I had sort of exhausted the opportunities for screening it. You know how festivals, you run your course and then they don't want you anymore because you're a 1 or 2 year old movie. So I met Bo Bigelow at an advocacy conference, Global Genes Conference, and he had made some films, and he was thinking about maybe making a film about his daughter who has USP7 mutation. And I said, medical conferences are a good place to show these kind of films, but they're a different type of event, and they're a little exclusive. They cost a lot to attend, so the general public doesn't go. And film festivals, maybe don't have the targeted audience that we like the researchers and the industry people that might actually do something about a rare disease. So is there a way we can combine both? Can we have sort of the curated audience as well as the curated films? And that kind of what led us to creating our own festival. We were surprised nothing like it existed. And maybe we thought, maybe it's a little too niche, but it worked out. It turned out that people wanted it. And we thought, we'd have our 2 films and some of our friends that had made films, and we'd be cobbling together barely enough films. But it didn't happen that way. As soon as we opened the door on Film Freeway, we were surprised how many rare disease films were out there, and they were all looking for another avenue to be seen.
And do you have, and so this has been operating now since 2017, is that correct?
Right, that was the first one in Boston. And we knew right away that we wanted to pick cities that were research hubs. And the goal is every time we do this, we're going to pick a new city and move it, whether we don't know where the next one's going to be, but it'll be a research hub, maybe Philadelphia or maybe DC area or something.
Have you found, so we've had the 2 previous years, this year's is coming up here shortly, and there was also I don't know quite what to call it, but there was a sort of a truncated version of some of the films that screened in Boston a few weeks ago. Is that accurate from this year's lineup?
Right. So it depends on how you count. We've really only had one full-fledged festival. That was 2017 in Boston. 2018 in Boston, we did selections of, and we did debut a couple of new to us films at that. And then just this 2 weeks ago in Boston, we did another selections of, but this time it was essentially a sneak peek because we showed a handful of films that will be, again, new to us and showing in our festival in November in San Francisco.
Have you noticed anything from the 2017 program to this program coming up in San Francisco in terms of either overall numbers or disease states or types of disease states that content's coming in from? Anything that has stuck out to you as notable?
Yeah, one thing was, we were, as I sort of suggested, we weren't so sure that this kind of event could succeed. And one was, could we get enough films? And then we did. And then could we get the support in terms of sponsors? And we did. And then the last sort of scary moment was, could we get the people in the seats? Would they buy the tickets? And then they did. We were really surprised. We sold out 5 out of 7 of our slates in our first festival. So as we approached San Francisco, we tried to build in more capacity. We can have multiple screenings at the same time in San Francisco, which we didn't do in Boston. So it's a bigger event. We showed about 30 films in 2017, and we'll show 50 this year.
So that's great growth. I imagine that you've seen some growth as well then in terms of sponsors, if not in monetarily, at least maybe in the number or the general interest. Have you seen more interest in sponsoring and supporting this festival?
Yeah, we do. It's really, it's a nice position to be in because people seem to recognize the value of what we're doing. And often they come to us maybe out of the blue or through a friend of a friend, and certainly have to pound the pavement like anybody does. But I had run another festival previously, just a small town general interest film festival, and that was a lot harder to find sponsors for. And this is a sector where, again, it's very niche, but that means everybody knows everybody.
And you mentioned, the curated lineup in addition to that curated audience concept. What have you found? You mentioned 5 out of the 7 right away selling out for the 2017 festival, if I understood correctly. But in terms of the demographics, researchers and scientists, patient advocates, members from industry and corporate partners, have you had any success or particular interest really with trying to generate people from Greater Boston, or this year coming up Greater San Francisco, to come in as well, or has that not been as much a focus as the other audiences?
Yeah, I'm not so sure how far and wide people are coming from. They're certainly not all locals, but that's the clear majority of the people for whom it's geographically convenient. We set our goal to be 1/3 patients and advocates, 1/3 industry, and 1/3 researchers or doctors and nurses and geneticists. And we didn't quite get that mix in 2017. It was a little more heavy on the industry side, but that's okay. We're getting there. And so this year, one of the steps we took for San Francisco was to offer a different tier of pricing to the patients and the advocates, so that it's very, very affordable for them. It's less than $6 to come see one of our screenings.
And what about the filmmakers? I would imagine that a number of the folks who submit are people who are probably in positions like you and Bo, where there was a diagnosis in the family, and capturing it through content, through story, through documentary felt either instinctual or, to your point, I want to add something to this space that makes it hopeful, that adds something other than dread and fear. Have you found that other filmmakers come from a similar place, or has it been more varied than that?
Yeah, I think that was our preconception, that everybody would be in our sort of situation. The filmmaker would be the affected person or the family, right? It'd be a very personal story. But then we were surprised to find, and very happy to find, people like you, people that are more, professional filmmakers that choose a topic, and that topic is rare disease. So we've got some Academy Award nominees making films, and they happen to be rare disease subjects. And of course, it's a compelling subject matter. You don't have to have lived it to recognize it as a good.
No, of course. That's a great point. And it helps when there's people who are at certain levels of success and entertainment who are helping tell these stories. It will then inevitably reach a greater audience. If I saw with one of the films that I was scanning through this morning that was narrated by William H. Macy, I see that William Macy is narrating a documentary, that's going to increase the likelihood that I'm going to watch it, to state the obvious. J.K. Simmons, I noticed, is credited in another one of the films on the list. Same goes. So having people like that participate means a great deal.
Yeah, and for my own film, I was fortunate enough to get Mary McDonnell, who people would know from Dances with Wolves or Donnie Darko or Battlestar Galactica.
And how did that come about?
Yeah, it was, my professional work is, my real job is post-production, making TV commercials, and sometimes doing special effects or animation for programs. So that was, I had done some work like that on The Closer, and Mary McDonnell had been part of that show. And so my friend who was the producer of that show had seen the rough cut of my film and said, some nice things about it, and said, is there anything I could do to help? And I said, well, could you ask Mary McDonnell if she would be the voice? And she said yes, and she was wonderful, and it's just perfect,
Did that experience, have you made another film since then, or do you have any intention to?
Yes and no. I helped Bo Bigelow make his film, And then together we started, as an outgrowth of the festival, we started something called 7,000 Films Wanted, where we put the word out to the patient community. Tell us your story that you think would make a good film. And a lot of people did, and we chose one. And then we hired one of our filmmakers from the first festival, and we said, you know, we're going to produce this film. You're going to direct it. You're going to edit it. Let's go. And that was John Dorflinger, who had done a film called This Is Mito on mitochondrial disease. And the film that came out of that is called Unconditional: Raising a Glass Sibling with a PAX1 Child. And the glass sibling refers to how you can be neglected if your parents are paying all their attention to someone with a rare disease, and all your attention goes to that sort of emergency situation. The sibling is just trying to live a normal life, but they may be seen as somewhat invisible or glass.
We find that in hemophilia a fair amount. The unaffected sibling is a turn of phrase that has been largely phased out of community advocacy verbiage because there isn't really such a thing as an unaffected. They may not have the diagnosis themselves, but it is impossible to convince me that they are unaffected by the diagnosis. So I certainly appreciate that point of view. I do want to play. We have a couple of clips that I'm going to have you help set up for us here momentarily. But before we do that, we didn't spend too much time on your personal story up front, and I did just want to kind of call that back. I imagine that doing this, well, I'll speak from my own experience as a person who has hemophilia, who has experienced loss in my family from hemophilia, and then who spent the last 2.5 years working on Bombardier blood, working in that world all the time and looking at images of hemophilia when untreated and hearing stories of early death every day in editing process, and talking about the film can be very exhausting, as I'm sure you can appreciate. And then I can only imagine that on top of yourself being a filmmaker, then having the responsibility of the Rare Disease Film Festival, where now all these other disease states and all these other powerful and emotional and complex stories, there's a certain amount of shepherding I would anticipate comes with feelings sometimes and would be quite overwhelming, at least if I were in your position. So I'm curious to know for you, personally, how has this role of father, filmmaker, founder of a film festival, how have you kind of taken care of yourself through all this?
Well, that's interesting. I think some of the work, whether it's making a film or running a festival, is an outlet, as maybe a therapeutic benefit. You know, it's I can't solve the science problems. You know, I'm not that smart. I certainly can't climb a mountain like in Bombardier blood, but I can't even organize really a 5K because I'm not a very good runner. And that's a lot of people's go-to is how they're going to raise some money, right? And so I did what I could do, which is the entertainment world and filmmaking and marketing and event planning. But in terms of sort of the emotional weight that comes from that, you know, each film, it's amazing how many stories there are, and they all hit you. And, you know, Bo and I have each realized that the thing that often gets us the most, it's probably maybe a little sexist, but you expect the moms to tell the story and maybe be a little emotional. But when you hear the dads telling their story, the dads that break down on camera and can barely keep it together, that hits us hard, you know. But then again, you know, the more perspective you get on this, you see all these terrible diseases. One of the things that you learn first is that it's pointless to compare. You know, your child isn't going to be like other children. And even within the Menkes population for our family, the children vary so drastically in their degree of symptoms. So you can't even compare within your own small population, really. But then, you know, because you're human, you do compare and you see all these different diseases. And sometimes it can be a reminder that maybe as bad as Lucas has it, it's not as bad. You know, it could be worse. And that's a very recalibrating your threshold for, you know, we're lucky Lukey is a happy, smiley kid. And some people don't get that. Now, maybe they get other things, like their kid can talk and ours can't. But it certainly, I think, helps me to keep my perspective wide rather than get too narrow and sort of tunnel visioned.
That makes sense. So tell me a little bit about these clips. The first one I have here is called New Lives. What can people expect to hear?
What you'll hear in New Lives, I found this moment that was so important to me. This woman, she's a mother of a boy with Duchenne's in Amsterdam, and she talks about hope, and we all in the rare community talk about hope, but she reminded me of this other aspect of it. We think of hope for the cure, hope for the treatment. And she said, but hope is more than that. Hope is also the hope that you'll have a happy life. And it's so basic, but it gets lost, I think. And for her to remind people of that, I thought was so important. And it brought me right back to why I made the film in the first place. I called it Menkes Disease, Finding Help and Hope. And I forgot that my initial concept was to provide that story in context that would offer a little hope.
All right, so here's that little bit of hope from New Lives, Stories of Duchenne and Becker Muscular Dystrophy, directed by Marco Fiata.
I'm Elizabeth, and I'm the mother of Justus. Justus is now almost 28, 27 and something. And I live in Amsterdam, or we live in Amsterdam. Justus is my son with muscular dystrophy. First thing I thought was, but we have time. You know, he had a twin sister, and she died after 4 days. Then I thought with Duchenne, you know, it's a shorter life, but it's still, we have 20 years ahead of us. So we're going to make the best out of it. So I remember when we drove down back from the hospital, I said to him, like, we have time, you know, we have time. We're going to make the best out of it. When Justus was just diagnosed, I thought, like, can I still laugh, you know, and have fun when your child has such a diagnosis? But then I realized that if he would have Duchenne and a depressed mom, that he would have a double problem. Hope is not only hope for a cure, it's also hope for a good life. It's hope to have fun, hope that things go well, you know, and also hope that what you do will help a lot of people. That's also my hope.
And Daniel, our next clip, 1 in a Million. What is 1 in a Million?
There's a great community. For whatever reason, Utah has become a real hub for the rare disease research efforts, and especially the undiagnosed community. So there's a line in 1 in a Million where Dr. Lorenzo Botto says people ask him, why would you spend so much time and energy trying to save a patient there's only 1 in a million? There's not very many of these. And his answer is just so beautiful. He says, because that 1 in a million person is an important person.
And you can hear it in his voice when he says it too, that it comes from a deep place. Let's listen to that clip from 1 in a Million, directed by Ross Kaufman and Jeremiah Zager.
Just the way he touched Tyler was loving. And I could see right there that he cared.
Traditional medical science had not found an answer for Tyler. So we decided that the best chance of finding a diagnosis was to do exome sequencing. This test is able to look at all of the 20,000 genes that we have. Their DNA was extracted, sequenced, and digitized in the quest to find a diagnosis. Some people ask, why do you spend all of your time and resources on conditions that affect 1 in a million people? That 1 person in a million is an important person.
So the Rare Disease Film Festival 2019 taking place November 9th and 10th in San Francisco, California. I will certainly be there for Bombardier Blood as well as a general festival attendee. It resonated with me, Daniel, toward the beginning of the talk when you mentioned that there are films and videos and stories shared through video in health conferences, and then there are film festivals. But is there a way that we can merge these worlds? And I've spent a lot of my time trying to put content into conferences about hemophilia, and I'm excited by your and Bo's initiative to merge these two worlds, because I think for someone like me, literally discovering disorder the Rare Disease Film Festival, I remember finding that online and thinking, well, I mean, come on. It was perfect. It was an absolute merge of things that I believe to be important. And I appreciate that you and Bo not only found a way to express, cope, help others by making films, but then went that extra step to create this hub that is very clearly needed. Going from 30 to 50 films and the growth of the sponsors and supporters, I think says a lot about the need for this kind of a festival. So thank you for creating it. And I hope that this is just the first of many years that Believe Limited in one way or another, BloodStream Media in one way or another can, if not be a partner, at least be a champion of the work that you're doing. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad you guys found us and you submitted Bonded to Your Blood. And it's working. We're so glad to have your film, too.
RareDiseaseFilmFestival.com, or you can Google Rare Disease Film Festival. Daniel DeFabio, co-founder and filmmaker, thank you for your time. And I look forward to meeting you in person and shaking your hand in a few weeks.
Yeah, that'll be great.
All right, now we are on to episode 41 comment segment. This is just going to be a little bit of my and Natalie's kind of takeaways from the BDC from our experience. So I'm going to set the timer here, Natalie. I've got a couple of bullet points in front of me, but otherwise we're just going to be having a free-flowing conversation for the length of time that this thing will allow us to. So you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Well, tell me in a nutshell, like what are some of the things that resonated with you personally the most from last week?
I have to say my favorite part of the entire conference was the moth.
Say why. And say what that was about.
So it was a storytelling hour in the evening. It was an adults only program, and 3 members of the community got up and told their story, and it was just really powerful to. Each one of them had a different experience with bleeding disorder, and it was just very well curated. It was very well performed, and and there was a musician, and it felt very very artful and very impactful and meaningful. I laughed, I cried, one of those kind of, I felt all the emotions.
It's cool, too, to be reminded of all the different ways a story can be told. Like, community stories are not unheard of. And obviously, we do a ton of work with stories here. But it's just interesting how that event stood out different from other formats where somebody stands up and for 5 to 10 minutes shares their story. Because it was done through the Moth's prism and storytelling approach and structure. And it was, orchestrated into a night where there was a host and there was a musician and there was a stage and there was an atmosphere.
And the lighting was nice.
Right. It's like all those things matter when you add them all up.
Yeah, it felt very, very cool. I didn't want it to end.
Well, that's great. Yeah, that was great. And there was a couple people who pulled me aside to say like, that was my favorite thing at the conference, which I mean, awesome, but that's amazing. And I think it was such a fundamentally simple event. It just goes to show the power of great stories well told.
Yeah. And, I've been a part of a storytelling event before. So just even when you have a story, working with a producer to kind of tighten the beginning, the middle, the end, and, put it in a format that is very engaging for people to listen to, without changing the content, without changing
the spirit of what you're saying.
Yeah. And without losing your voice. Because all 3 of them, their voice was very clear throughout their storytelling. But yeah, it was very, very cool. And then I talked to Vanessa after, one of the people who shared her story. And it was just like the experience of doing that, being a part of that alone was really impactful for her. So not only did she impact those listening, she was also impacted by being empowered to get up and share in that way. So it's just, it was very human and I really enjoyed it.
while you won't be able to appreciate the lighting and the atmosphere necessarily, this was a collaboration with BloodStream Media. So we will be releasing those stories through a new podcast, BloodStream Journeys, that's going to be launching here in the next couple of months. So we'll be sure to announce it on BloodStream when it happens. If you're following us on social media, you'll see it there as well. But BloodStream Journeys will be carrying those and other similarly structured stories as we go forward. So not to worry, you're not going to miss out.
Yay. What about you? What was your highlight?
Well, it's it's to state the obvious. It's such an important week of the year for everybody involved in National Bleeding Disorders work. But for Believe Limited specifically, we have a number of big events that take place. It's a huge touch point where we see a lot of people, partners that we work with, community members and friends. So it's just like such a culminating event of the year in many ways. The science fair, we talked about it on here plenty. And that was something new that we were launching, that we were working on until the 11th hour, that had, a lot of moving parts, literally and figuratively. And anytime it's year one of something, it's just, it has a special place in the brain as you're trying to pull it off. So it looked awesome as it was coming together. We were rehearsing for the Teen Impact Awards and stuff while another contingency from the team was setting up in the exhibition hall, the 3,000 square foot space that we had for this thing, and rolling out the floor and putting up the walls and the trifolds and getting everything in there. And they were sending pictures and videos, and I was getting really excited, and I knew it was going to be awesome. And then when Friday came around and, the doors opened for the exhibition hall, you just start waiting for people to walk in. And it's that moment before where it's like, okay, I hope people come to it. I hope they like it. I hope nothing falls on anyone. I hope it's okay. And we had 800 people come through, and we had a lot of positive feedback, and so many kids.
So many kids were super into it.
The thing I loved hearing the most, I heard this multiple times, and my favorite thing I heard was, my kid loved it and I loved it. My kid loved it and I loved it. How many things can you go to at a medical conference where you can say, my kid loved it and I loved it?
I mean, that's like the Disney movie seal of approval.
And that was our goal. We talked about this thing, and we'll give people a map when they come in where there'll be a glossary of key terms and the medical advisors and additional context for the modules, but we'll guise it as though it's a map. I think we could have even gone further with this idea, but we compared it to like that Disney-like experience, and our microscopes were kind of built as these big ballooned, oversized, more really Nickelodeon-esque kind of things. But again, that idea, it carried through very well. We had, I think, the impact we wanted to. Great ideas for ways to improve it. Great ideas for next year. Great amount of interest in how it can come to meetings around the country, regional meetings and state level meetings. And now the conversation starts about, okay, we have, Believe Limited owns an 8-foot rotating knee and 3 giant green microscopes and a construction site for gene therapy vector create. So now we have to figure out what exactly is the most sensible way to go about bringing these out to places that would benefit from having them. So that's a new task on our plate for the end of 2019, 2020.
Yeah, it was super cool to be clad in a scientist lab coat and stand outside and just watch families go in and then watch them come out. Yeah. And the energy of when they were coming out, or watching parents like dragging children out who didn't want to leave.
I know, that was really funny. The kids, the kids who were at the microscopes, and they would just keep watching. We had all these videos that were in, it was like Petri dishes, and when you put them under the microscope, there was a chip that would auto read, and the video would play. So some kids and there were 6 videos, and they're only a minute long, but that's 6 minutes plus whatever time it takes to change them. And if you wanted to watch them more than once, suddenly you're at the microscope alone for 10 minutes. So it was really cute to see the kids on the step stools just smacking their mom's hands away.
I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave. Another cool thing, speaking of kids, but bigger kids, the Teen Impact Awards were awesome.
Year 5, big deal. That is a landmark, that is a milestone for the program. Another, year where we honored more than 70 teens, about half of which were there in person, which is really good. It's always a challenge getting to honor as many of them as possible in person. So that was a great number. And as always, the most interesting part of the evening was when they had the opportunity to speak to the impact they were making, prompted with these really open-ended one-sentence questions, but just to hear where they go with them. And I think this every year as I'm on stage and I'm up there with them, I feel the energy in the room. I'm partially responsible for creating the energy in the room. And what I always take from those moments when they're answering the questions is how comfortable they are. As teenagers speaking in front of groups of people, I don't generally think about like comfort and ease and poise, generally speaking. But at the Teen Impact Awards every year, I feel like there's such comfort and ease with what they say and how they choose to say it. And I attribute that, at least in part, to the environment that we set up in the Teen Impact Awards, that no matter what you're doing, big or small, it matters. And we want you to know that. And I have to take it as a compliment to the program that these honorees do know that. And that is why they share very openly, very comfortably during that program. So I was really pleased, again, with how it's gone and hearing them, so many of the guys and gals who I talked to later that night, Friday, Saturday, walking around, they just want to keep talking about the stuff that they're doing and making a difference, or their parents want to. But a lot of the teens themselves, intersected with as passing through the halls, and they just want to kind of keep talking about being involved in the community and making an impact and doing good. And it's like, man, I don't know, if you're working with young people, what's a better goal than that? What's a better end game than that? So I guess, and we're running a little long, the Teen Impact Awards, the weekend itself, but I think the Teen Impact Awards in particular is a real validation to me of the work we do and why we do it. To really see the energy and to see all the positive that comes out of it, it's a no-brainer. And it's like, okay, you just got to remember that when it's like April and you have your head down in some tactically annoying thing. It's all about those moments with those individuals. I mean, there was one person who shared in a meeting. I forget who told me this. There's one person who shared at their chapter meeting that receiving a Teen Impact Award was, quote, the most important thing that ever happened in their life. Now, I am sure I could analyze this individual's life and debunk that from an empirical fact point of view, but it doesn't matter. That young person's point of view is that the Teen Impact Award was the most important thing that happened to them. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank God it was there. I don't know. It's amazing. So, and not to bury the lead a little bit, but we did also launch the scholarship named after Adam, which was a big deal. Knew that was something that I and Believe wanted to do for a long time, and at some point this felt like the right time to do it, and the Teen Impact Awards felt like the right program to connect it to. So not a lot of details yet. teenimpactawards.com, probably early 2020 for information on the Adam S. Lynch Memorial Scholarship. So there we have it.
And that's going to change many kids' lives.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to think about. Like we're at the moment before, but 5 years from now.
Well, and that this is going to impact the ability for them to achieve the dreams and the goals that they're stating they want to do now,
Yeah.
Super cool. But yeah, I mean, the conference was just filled with a lot of really magical moments and moments of connection.
All right, we ran a little long, but so be it. Thank God it's at the end of the podcast, huh? So that's it. That's our comment segment for this month. Stick around for Mama Sue's and the wrap-up, and that'll be all for episode 41. Want to one last time thank Takeda, the founding sponsor and the presenting sponsor of the BloodStream Podcast, for making this podcast possible. Find out about other resources that Takeda is responsible for at bleedingdisorders.com. And it is now time to find out the resources that Mama Sue has in store in the form of streaming recommendations for your downtime at home, on the road, or otherwise. Hi, Mom. How are you?
Hi there. How are you?
Well, I'm doing well. So you've strayed a little bit. We have two streaming recommendations, and then get this, a brick and mortar old fashioned movie review from Mama Sue. So we're branching out here in this segment.
Yes, we are.
Very exciting. So tell us about the first thing up is Diet Fiction from Amazon. What is Diet Fiction?
Well, I watch a lot of the ones on health and diet, and this one basically. This was I think it was from 2018. And it said some things that, of course, we already know that, but what they say by 2030, 40% of people will be obese, 80% will be overweight. But the reason it's called Diet Fiction is there's so many quick fix diets out there that this documentary says don't last and don't work, and some are not even healthy for you.
Is there any common thread between them, or what does it kind of have to? It sounds like it makes a comment on these sort of fad diets in general.
It does. I mean, they said basically, exercise is so important, but exercise makes you hungrier. So when you're finished exercising, if you eat the wrong food, you could very well eat a lot and gain weight even after exercise, which kind of makes sense. And I never thought of that. And then it was talking about like sugars and like the paleo diets. That people eat all this heavy protein and the body just turns it into sugar anyway. Even if you're avoiding sugar and carbs, it's going to turn that protein into sugar. Yeah, and it said, that so many people are saying stay away from gluten, stay away from gluten. They said there's nothing wrong with gluten unless you're allergic to it. Eat the gluten. It's not a problem.
And also, as I understand it, there's something in the way that we process gluten. It's not necessarily gluten inherently, because there are other places in the world where people who have gluten allergies here in the U.S. are able to eat the bread products and such with no problem. Are you aware of that, or did it get into that at all?
That is interesting, though. I was not aware of that.
This is one of the numerous food-related things that you've reviewed for us. Is there a particular piece of information that you're craving out there, or something that you're still seeking to learn about food? I feel like you're torturing yourself with all the things you're learning that we're not supposed to be doing.
Well, it's interesting because some of them flat out contradict each other. But one thing that this one said, which I have always thought, is when people say healthy food is expensive, they said that's flat out not true. And they called it peasant food. Healthy food is peasant food, they called it. Vegetables, beans, rice, potatoes. And that frozen vegetables are very cheap and very nutritious. And that so many Americans, like if you tell them you're dieting or you're exercising, what are you doing about your protein? How are you getting your protein? They said basically no one in this country is protein deprived. If you never ate a piece of meat again, you would be perfectly fine. And as I saw in another show, the cows don't eat protein, they just eat grass, and we eat the cows for protein. Right. So, people who drink these protein shakes, they said it's just $1 billion industry taking advantage of people.
Yeah, the health and wellness industry is an industry. There's truth, and there's a lot of things in there that are valuable, but that have been maybe exploited or overstated or just, kind of corrupted by commercializing in one way or another. And it's, in Los Angeles, there's plenty of it. You see a lot of it.
And they said like the dairy and beef industries, when they show that plate divided and how much meat you should be eating. And they said the dairy and beef industries send dietitians and doctors to these conferences for free.
Of course.
And they educate them for free. And when, in fact, really, we all like meat. Most of us are carnivores, but you don't need it. You don't need it to be healthy at all.
And we're getting so good at making things that taste like meat that aren't meat. The Beyond Burgers, the oat milk craze, but that I have to say, Natalie and I are a part of. Oat milk is my favorite milk alternative so far. And
you and Natalie told me that you really like it.
And it seems like we're not alone. It's a huge trend right now. So we're finding more and more ways to, have the tasty stuff we enjoy without the health downsides that seem to just be more and more clear all the time. As you said, certain things seem to contradict each other, but there's certain things we seem to be hearing over and over again also that we just need to accept.
The sugar industry blames the fat industry, and the fat blames the sugar.
Oh, shocking. That's really surprising. All right, so moving away from food and to the birds. For the Birds on Netflix. A bird one, again, a pattern here. Food and birds. I think you're exposing what your interests are, whether you know it or not. Tell us about For the Birds.
Well, when I first saw that, of course, with the title, it almost sounded like it could be a little funny. But unfortunately, it wasn't funny. It's about a woman, a normal woman who lived upstate New York, actually. This one was made last year. It's by Netflix, actually. And she became a hoarder of birds. And it all started just finding one bird out in her yard. And it ballooned into having over 100 ducks, chickens, turkeys, roosters, primarily ducks. And it just showed her descent and her confusion. And she was a married woman. And the ASPCA was gently trying to get in and help her and get her to surrender them. And their last name was Murphy. And it was just kind of sad. And like, why does it happen? Like, what happened in her life that one day that she found the bird and it just turned into a disaster? And the animals were not kept well, and they were roaming her house and dirtying her house and sleeping in the bed. And they showed photos, and it was very sad. But the end is a bit of an upswing, I must say. It's not all dark. There is a bit of an upswing at the end. So it's not all sad. You'll
all right, because I was going to say that wasn't a very inspiring sales pitch. It was a little bit depressing.
Yes, it was. And I was like, I don't usually like to watch depressing things. But at the end, there is a bit of an upswing. So I would recommend it. Yes, it was very well done.
And of the birds, so it's more about a hoarder, really, than about birds.
Yeah, I suppose it was about a hoarder, yes.
All right, so now we're straying a little bit, but from the streaming world to the live theater, Downton Abbey, one of your, if not your favorite show. I think you've said it's the best show you've ever seen, right? That's your favorite show? Is that fair to say?
I did say that on this show, that it was my favorite, so I was anxiously awaiting the movie. I actually rarely go to movie theaters, so I went, and I would give it a B. All the same characters with a couple of added, and I'm not telling anyone anything about the movie. The commercial says that the Queen and King are coming to Downton Abbey for a visit, and that's what it was about. Anyone who watched the series was so used to the 5 or 6 seasons that it was on. Every episode was filled with drama, love, hate, treachery, sadness, happiness, heavy drama, good and bad, every episode. This really didn't have much drama in it because everything that could happen to this family has already happened.
Sure.
There's nothing that could happen that hasn't happened. And the movie only takes place a couple of years after the series ended. So the children are still small, the grandchildren and the children. So unless they zoom them up to adulthood in the next few years, I don't know what a second movie could really do. I loved seeing the old characters. I absolutely loved it. I'm glad I went. But I didn't think it was as good as the series, I have to say. But it was only an hour and 20 minutes, so what do you expect, right?
And was it that the storyline, so you enjoyed seeing the characters, as you said, so many things have already happened to them. Was it that something new wasn't really happening or wasn't interesting enough? Was it not dramatic enough? Or what was it missing, do you think?
Even if someone didn't see the series, watch the series, they would enjoy this movie. It's a nice rated G to PG movie. But, there was really no drama. I mean, it was just, with fussing around for the visit and the downstairs and the upstairs. But there was really no drama in it at all, I thought. But I loved seeing it. I mean, I would see it again. It was great, but not as good as the series, I have to say.
Well, I will also share that, like you, I recently went to see a movie. And I don't go to the movies nearly as much as people might think. But I went to see the Joker movie, which everyone is talking about right now. And I am a big fan of that character. This is one of the fads that I am just like the oat milk fad, the Joker movie fad is also a fad that I belong to. And I really loved that movie too. So I would go ahead and recommend, if you're in the GPG world, you can go see Downton Abbey. And if you're in the R, it's going to mess with your mind, but it's really interesting and cinematic and beautiful and strange, then you can go see Joker. And these are your options. This is what the Lynch family here recommends.
No, I did hear the Joker was great, very dark, rated R, but it teaches you why the Joker was who he was. It's like a prequel to the way he is, correct?
Correct. And, it's a take on this character. And one of the things, I'm not a comic book person by any stretch of the imagination, but something I've kind of come to appreciate about the Marvel movie world and the DC universe and even The Walking Dead is how when they adapt these things, but especially Marvel and DC, it's not as though every iteration of the Joker shares the exact same backstory and they don't build on each other, so people can kind of go back and they can pick the best parts of that character's history now that they want to use to iterate it anew in 2019. So when I heard that this movie was being made, I love Joaquin Phoenix. I love Heath Ledger, and The Dark Knight's one of my top 3 movies. So I was very excited, but also kind of like you with Downton Abbey, like, oh, I love this character and I love that actor. And if this doesn't go well, it's going to be really painful. But it was the best case scenario. It was a very unique, without giving anything away about this, it's a very specific origin story take on this character, and it looks much more into the character and how that character became the Joker than it does the behavior and idiosyncrasies of this chaotic force in Batman's world. It's not from that perspective, the way Heath Ledger and even Jack Nicholson in Batman. It's not from that Batman perspective. It's a totally different perspective. And, it's also funny too, not to ramble about this too much, but if you read the reviews, Joaquin Phoenix, and they say the same thing about Daniel Day-Lewis and some of these other actors who just really say, go for it. Half the reviews say his performance is an all-timer, incredible, and half of them he's overacting and it's far too much. It just goes to show. I mean, you have to go for stuff when you're creating art.
Well, I heard that he should get an award for it. I mean, several different types of people told me it was great.
All right, Ma. Well, that was fun. Thanks for your recommendations. Anything fun you're doing for Halloween? That'll be coming up soon. I know it's a big holiday in your life.
No, I won't. I'll just be giving out to the children. You know, I like seeing the children come around. In my neighborhood, I'd say they decorate more for Halloween than Christmas around here. Some people just go way out there with the decorations, which I love. I love to drive through at night and see all the decorations. So I like it. It's a non-sectarian holiday, and everyone has fun. Although it does seem to be, not that many kids come to the door anymore. I think parents are afraid. 99.9% of people are good people. Every day after Thanksgiving, you hear about some state where someone got, even when I was a kid.
After Halloween, you mean?
Yeah, the day after Halloween, you'd hear about a nut job that gave bad candy or a razor blade or whatever. But anyway, most people are good. And I think many people are just taking their children on the block with the neighbors they know.
Stay away from razor blades. Enjoy what you're streaming. And thank you, Mom. We'll talk to you again next month.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right, it is that time again for us to tell you that is all for this episode. Special thanks to everyone at Believe Limited, the National Hemophilia Foundation, Entertainment to Effect Change, the Hemophilia Alliance, and our presenting sponsor, Takeda, as well as our segment sponsor, Genentech. Subscribe to the BloodStream Podcast and the Ask the Expert podcast on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a rating, share our shows, and help spread the word. You can email us at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com. You'll also find Bloodstream on Facebook.com/BloodstreamMedia and at BloodstreamInfo on Instagram and Twitter. Reminder to check out the program notes for this episode in your podcast player or on BloodstreamPod.com for links and additional information about the various stories featured on this episode. My name is Patrick James Lynch.
And I'm Natalie Lynch.
And until next time, take self-care of yourself. Bye, everybody.